My name is Rose. I'm 34 years old, and I live with my husband, Mark. We both work at the company that my father-in-law founded. My father-in-law has already retired, but he built up a small construction company into a business with annual sales of $173 million. It seems that he played hardball like acquiring rival construction companies, but everyone praises his business skills. My husband, who was to follow in his father's steps, had a pampered upbringing as their only son and has a gentle character that doesn't seem to really apply in this harsh, cold world. Although being gentle sounds nice, in reality he is an indecisive person who can't make decisions about anything, and I started to feel that he was unsuitable as both a husband and a company manager. Even my husband would say things like, "I'm not cut out to be a manager, so even if I become the CEO, I'll probably just only look like a CEO, but that's easier for me," showing that he wasn't seriously thinking about taking over the company. We've been married for 5 years now, but recently I've been particularly dissatisfied with my husband's lack of initiative. In contrast to my husband, I consider myself a decisive person, and when my father-in-law was active, he seemed to like that about me and gave me various jobs. Before I got married, I used to work at a bank, so I always work while paying attention to the numbers. I quit the bank when I got married, intending to become a full-time housewife. But my father-in-law asked me to work at the construction company, so I decided to do that. Shortly after I started working, my father-in-law started inviting me to meetings, where board members would participate and asked for my opinions about management. At first, the directors seemed to question why the founder's daughter-in-law was invited to important meetings, but as I gave appropriate opinions, they started to listen to me. My husband was also a director, but he didn't participate in the meetings, and both the directors and my father-in-law seemed to think that was normal at this point. After the meetings, when I returned home, my husband would be watching TV with a carefree look on his face. "Why didn't you attend today's meeting? You're an important director. You need to be aware of that." As I spoke angrily, my husband argued, thinking that he did nothing wrong. "Even if I attend, I don't understand the content of the discussions well. The directors like you better, so there's no problem, right?" I wonder if he doesn't like me participating in the board meetings because he said such things like that. My father-in-law has been teaching me about running the company in detail, and it seems like he wants me to be his successor. At first, I was also new to the management, but I started to enjoy the work. Before I knew it, I was working hard to live up to my father-in-law's expectations. About 2 years after I started attending meetings, my father-in-law fully retired. The directors also started consulting me when they needed to make important decisions, and my husband was being ignored. I thought that if such a situation like this happened, my husband would regret and devote himself more to his work. But on the contrary, he became less dedicated than ever before. He would go to work in the morning, but he would go out somewhere before noon and then return home. Even when he saw me at home, he wouldn't talk about work, and it seemed he didn't care about the company at all. On the other hand, I was getting busier as my work at the company increased. After my father-in-law retired, the executives started relying more on me, and I was assigned tasks more like a CEO. It's a big company with many employees, and for the sake of those employees, I was doing my best to increase the company's sales and profits. With the efforts of the employees, sales began to increase, and I became more interested in managing the company and became absorbed in my work. On the other hand, my husband seemed to lose interest in work, and he began to show up at the company less and less. The conversations between us at home decreased, and our relationship became strained. And during that time, my husband came home and began to say this: "I ran into Maria today, and we had lunch together." He casually mentioned this. My sister is 2 years older than me, and she had just divorced half a year ago. The cause of the divorce was my sister's affair, and it caused a big commotion when my sister's angry husband stormed into our parents' house. My husband went to my parents' house to calm my sister's husband, as I was busy at work. Having a pampered upbringing and being gentle, my husband persuaded my sister's husband, who reluctantly left at that time, and my sister later said, "The company's CEO is really amazing." He led my husband back home, who was really enraged. She was praising my husband. My husband, with his calm attitude and laid-back way of speaking, probably managed to defuse my sister's angry husband. My sister was able to divorce her husband after paying alimony, but it seemed that her view of my husband changed after this incident. Until then, she seemed to consider my husband, who was not particularly good-looking and indecisive, as nothing more than a rich guy. But she seemed to have convinced herself that he was a reputable company executive. My sister also became single after her divorce, and she always loved rich people. So to her, my husband must have seemed like a good catch. But I, who was absorbed in my work, never imagined such a thing would happen. And of course, my sister would not know that my husband is just a director and is not involved in the management of the company. My sister's divorced husband was an elite employee at a foreign company, and she was bragging to me at their wedding. "My husband is an excellent employee, so his salary is high and he's handsome, so you must be jealous." Indeed, my sister's ex-husband was good-looking and sharp-minded, and he always gave off a stylish vibe when he was talking. I couldn't understand why my sister, who had such a wonderful husband, would have an affair. 3 months had passed since my husband told me he had dinner with my sister. "Rose, I need to talk to you." Hearing those words from my husband for the first time gave me a bad feeling. As I nervously waited for him to speak, "Actually, your sister is pregnant with my child, so I want a divorce." I was shocked at the divorce request, but even more surprised to learn that my sister was pregnant. As I was left speechless, my husband continued, "On my next day off, your sister is going to come here and have a discussion, so please, cooperate." Bewildered by his request, I asked my husband, "So, you want to marry my sister?" Seeing the troubled look on my husband's face, "I don't necessarily want to get married, but if a child is involved, there's no choice." Frustrated with my indecisive husband, I answered with a sigh, "Well, if there's a child involved, there's no choice. Let's talk about the future when my sister comes." Knowing that I wouldn't be able to decide anything by talking to my husband, I decided to meet my sister directly. Although I was thinking about a divorce, I had to discuss the company's matters with my father-in-law. As the wife of the founder's son, I was involved in the company's management, but after the divorce, I would just be a stranger. The next day, I went to my in-laws' house and told my father-in-law what my husband had said. My mother-in-law, who was present, was happy that my husband had a child, but she became quiet when my father-in-law glared at her. It seems my mother-in-law cares more about her grandchildren than the company's management. After thinking for a while, my father-in-law spoke with a smile. Rose, I want you to continue participating in the company's management as usual. I don't care about Mark. I will take the responsibility, so let him do as he likes. It seems my father-in-law cares more about the company's management than his son or grandchildren. Although he has retired, my father-in-law still has a say in the company, and he owns a large portion of the company's shares, so there are no executives who would oppose to his will. I was also finding the job interesting, so it was regrettable to give it up at this point. Now that the work issue has been settled, it's time to talk about the future with my sister. My sister, who visited our house on her day off, smiled and said, "It's too bad you couldn't have a child, Rose, isn't it? I'll give you a lot of alimony. Please, leave this house immediately." She spoke with a victorious smirk. My husband just kept silent, merely listening to our conversation without saying anything. Despite being the very cause of the problem, my husband just sat there, with an uninterested look on his face, which left me flabbergasted. I'm fine with a divorce, but we need to talk about compensation and division of property. I think it's best to get a lawyer and make everything clear. I never thought you would fall for someone like Mark, who's nothing special. I responded to my sister sarcastically. For a moment, my sister gave me a stern look, but her face quickly returned to a smirk. I finally understand that it's not about looks, but what's inside that matters with men. I was amused by her claiming to fully understand my husband, and while trying not to laugh, I said, "That's good for you then. I hope you and Mark live happily together." She might have been talking about his money. She seemed to assume that my husband was the CEO of my father-in-law's company, but it appeared she hadn't heard anything from him. After the discussion ended, my sister stated she would start living here. As she had brought a moving company, I took only the essentials and left. Knowing my quick-to-act sister, I had predicted this would happen, and had already arranged for a new apartment. I had hired a lawyer and had all the paperwork ready for property division and claiming compensation. The next day, after I had moved all my belongings, I began negotiations for compensation and property division with my husband and sister along with my lawyer. My husband was present, still acting as if he was unrelated to this, and only my sister spoke. "As I said before, I'll pay whatever compensation you want. Just decide on your own." Hearing her words, my lawyer decided to claim compensation for my sister, in addition to my husband. My sister was still making payments on compensation claimed by her ex-husband, so the lawyer had previously advised me that claiming from her might be impossible. But since she said she'd pay anything, we decided to claim from her as well. When it came to property division, my sister said cheerfully, "This mansion is originally Mark's family property, so it wouldn't be part of the property division, right?" With an expressionless face, my lawyer answered her, "This building and land are owned by the company, so it's up to the company to decide." It seemed like my husband also thought this house belonged to his father, and he said, "Is that so? I thought this house belonged to my father," he asked, seemingly without much surprise. On the other hand, my sister turned to the lawyer. "Wait a minute. So you're saying I can't live in this house?" The lawyer replied in an uptight way, "It's owned by the company, so if the company approves, you can continue living here." At these words, my sister seemed to relax a bit. "Why didn't you say that sooner? Since Mark, the CEO, will be living here, it should be fine, right?" The lawyer looked surprised for a moment, then burst out laughing. What are you talking about? Your sister here is the CEO, not Mark. I laughed as I watched my sister, who was planning to remarry Mark, not knowing this fact. My sister immediately turned to Mark and shouted, "What? Mark? You're not the CEO?" Seeing Mark's troubled expression, I stepped in to explain to my sister. Mark is just an advisor without any executive power. I'm an executive officer, but they made me the CEO too. Mark's father, the founder, had been the CEO for a long time, but when he retired, he made me an executive officer and even appointed me as the CEO. The other directors also valued my accomplishments, so there was no opposition. On the other hand, my husband was made an advisor without executive power, due to my father-in-law's arrangement. He received a director's salary, but he didn't actually have any work to do, so the amount was less than that of an ordinary employee. That's why I was the one who covered all our living expenses. My husband, who never worried about our household finances, didn't care whether the house he lived in was owned by the company or by my father-in-law. Although the house was owned by the company, my responsible father-in-law had been charging me rent, so I had always considered it to be a regular rental property. The lawyer asked me, laughing, "So is it okay to continue renting this house to Mark?" My sister reacted to the word rent in the lawyer's question. "What do you mean by rent? You're going to charge Mark for it? It's company property, isn't it? Make it free." The lawyer, laughing again at my sister's words, presented the amount of rent. My sister was surprised to see the amount, and it seemed that it was the first time my husband knew about the rent too. "So a big house like this does have high rent. With my salary, I can't afford it." With his board member salary, if he pays the rent, he would be left with almost no money, making it impossible for him to live. Regarding the division of property, during our 5-year marriage, my husband used up all of his small board member salary, and my salary disappeared due to the expensive rent and living expenses. We didn't have much savings left, just enough to split the savings in half. After the lawyer left, my sister, who had been hoping for a mansion, was completely deflated when she found out it was rented, and was standing there in a daze. My husband was smiling as usual, so I suggested, "Since your mother was happy that you're having a child, why don't you move out of here and go back to your parents' house?" My husband agreed, but I found it funny that I had to be so considerate to my soon-to-be ex-husband. I was worried about whether such a helpless husband could raise a child, but it wasn't my concern, so I decided to leave. To my sister, who seemed to have forgotten about her own alimony, I asked, "Sis, are you sure about the alimony payment? You were talking big, but you're still paying the alimony for your ex-husband, right?" I talked to her just to confirm, but my sister, who looked like she had come to her senses, was surprised. "Wait, do I have to pay alimony too?" To my surprised sister, who seemed like she hadn't been listening to anything discussed today, my husband quickly responded, "You did say I can give you plenty of alimony, but you weren't expecting that from me, were you? My salary is really low." My husband and my sister looked at each other, both with surprised expressions. I'm not a lawyer, but watching their exchange, I felt like bursting into laughter. As far as I was concerned, I already had their signatures on the divorce papers and the alimony claim documents, so I didn't care. But my husband and my sister seemed pathetic to me. My ex-husband, who had remarried my sister, seemed to have gone back to his parents' house, as I had advised, but I heard that my sister and her in-laws were constantly fighting. The main cause was that it turned out that my sister was not really pregnant with my ex-husband's child, and his mother, who had been expecting an heir, was furious. My ex-father-in-law, who seemed to have disliked my sister for taking his son away from me, didn't even talk to her. As for the alimony, my ex-father-in-law paid on my husband's behalf, and I received the full amount. But when my sister saw this, she asked her father-in-law, "Father-in-law, please pay my alimony as well." In response to this, the father-in-law argued back, "You have no right to call me father," and he yelled at her. Having received none of what she had hoped for, my sister fled from her husband's family home without a word and has been missing since. It's too stupid that she remarried my ex-husband just to bear the burden of alimony. My ex-husband seemed to want to get back together with me, but he was scolded by his father. "Someone like you shouldn't even think about having a family, especially since you can't even manage your own affairs properly." Even if my ex-husband asked me to get back together with him, I would never consider getting back together with him. I lost trust in him when he cheated on me with my sister, and I was appalled by his indifferent attitude during our discussions. My ex-husband was dismissed from his board position and resigned, and now he seems to be working as a temporary staff member. Meanwhile, I'm still the CEO of the company, and I am enjoying my work so much that I'm not considering remarriage. Even after parting with my ex-husband, I keep in touch with my father-in-law and receive advice from him when I'm in trouble. For now, I want to dedicate myself to the company and work hard for the sake of all my employees, as if I am married to my work. She's 20 years younger than me, and she's pregnant, so let's get a divorce. Suddenly, my husband brings his mistress to our home, and then he asks me for a divorce. Honestly, our marriage has been falling apart for a while now. I no longer love my husband, who goes out without taking care of our children or doing any household chores. Okay, here's the divorce papers. I'm taking everyone except our oldest son. I hand over the divorce papers to my husband and say that to him. Then my husband says something shocking. "Huh? You can take our oldest son too." I couldn't believe it. That's impossible because this child is... When I confronted him with the truth, my husband was dumbfounded and fell to his knees. I am Catherine, and I'm 51 years old. I'm a housewife. I got married to my husband, John, 14 years ago. Our meeting was through a mutual introduction. In the past, I worked at a web design company as a web designer, focused on my work, and haven't had any romance for many years. And my colleagues introduced me to him because they were worried about me. My husband was friendly and good at having conversations. Even though I hadn't been much into dating, the time I spent with my husband was fun, and I thought we could build a fun family if we got married. However, the journey to marriage was not easy. My husband was a divorcee and had a child. It seemed that his previous wife had left the house, leaving the child behind, and he said he was working while raising the child. When I consulted with my family and friends about it, they all told me it was definitely better not to marry him. "You'll struggle after marriage." Everyone would say the same thing to me. But for me, even this obstacle only ignited my feelings of love for John. I thought I had to support him, who was a single father. Since then, I have been meeting with my husband's eldest son, Alex, more frequently. "Alex, what are you going to play today?" "I'm not playing with you." "Then, do you want to eat something? I'll cook anything for you." "No." Alex didn't trust me at all. I wonder if it's because I have no experience in raising a child. When I felt anxious, my husband always comforted me. "It's okay. Alex will understand someday. Thank you for taking my son so seriously." I was happy to hear that, so I was okay even if I was rejected by my eldest son. I'll love him like my own child when we get married. I'm glad you love Alex and that I met you. When I think about it now, I might have been conceited, thinking that I was mentally supporting my husband. And then, half a year into dating, I found out I was pregnant and we got married. My eldest daughter, Cherry, and my second son, Albert, were born the following year, and I became a mother of 3. Since I gave birth to 2 kids, I was swamped with childcare every single day. However, my husband didn't help me at all. "Catherine, Albert is crying. Can you comfort him for a bit? I can't take my hands off right now." "Me? No way. He wants his mother, doesn't he?" My husband, who pushed my crying second son onto me while I was taking care of my eldest daughter, would just play around with his smartphone. My husband always came home late and was drunk. On his days off, he went out casually and came home in the evening, so there was no time for him to do any childcare or even any time for me to talk with my husband. And I didn't have time to sleep, taking care of the children every day. Stress just kept building up. "Can you help me a bit?" "Huh? I'm tired from work. What's a person who's at home all day saying? Raising a child is a woman's job." I couldn't believe it. If I knew he was like this, I wouldn't have married him. I felt deceived. But when I thought about my newborn children, I couldn't divorce easily. Taking care of my rebellious Albert and Cherry, who were in their terrible 2s, was really hard. Still, I tried desperately to become their mother. The relationship with Alex remained distant, and he hardly spoke to me. I woke him up in the morning and fed him to send him to elementary school, but we hardly had any conversation. I was too busy taking care of the younger children and didn't have the capacity to care about Alex. Several years later, when the eldest son became a junior high school student, he entered his rebellious phase. "Alex, have you finished your homework instead of reading comic books all the time?" "Shut up." "Shut up? I'm saying this for your own good, you know."
"That's why it's so annoying. Don't play the mother role."
This is what Alex would always spout and not listen to what I say. In the end, I decided to consult with my husband about Alex's behavior. "Could you try talking to Alex a bit? He's not studying, just playing all day, and he doesn't listen to anything I say. Is this because of his rebellious phase?"
"Isn't that because of the way you raised him? Because you neglected him so far, he doesn't listen, right?"
"What? I don't want to hear that from you, who didn't do any parenting and just played around."
"You think I was just playing around?"
John, enraged, stood up. "No, you're always out drinking. You never help me when I'm busy."
"I can't help it if I have social commitments. This is part of my job too. You're living off my salary. Don't act so arrogant."
I couldn't say anything to that. I quit my job because parenting was busy. My living expenses are solely the money my husband provides for me. He only gives me the bare minimum, so we're barely making a living. Of course, I don't have any money that I can use freely. That's why when it comes to money, I can't talk back to him. However, Alex's behavior is getting worse and worse, and there are days when he doesn't come home until late at night, even though he's in middle school. I thought he was going to become a delinquent or something at this rate. Despite my best efforts to persuade both Alex and my husband, they wouldn't listen. Before I knew it, I was fighting with my husband every day. And then the days when my husband didn't come home increased. This lifestyle continued for many years. I was past 50 and Alex was a senior in high school. I thought we would understand each other when his rebellious phase was over, but the reality doesn't go the way you wanted it to. Even now, he ignores me or only yells at me and verbally abuses me when I try to talk to him. We couldn't even have a decent conversation. My husband was coming home in the mornings more often, and our married life was collapsing. Then one day something happened. My husband brought a young woman home. Who is this? My girlfriend, who's 20 years younger than me, is pregnant. So please, let's get a divorce. My husband started begging on his knees as he said that. To be honest, I wasn't surprised because I had noticed for a long time that my husband was having an affair. However, I couldn't believe that he brought her to this house where we have children. The woman he was having an affair with smiled at me. Nice to meet you. I'm Amy. I was amazed that she could smile knowing that it was an affair. She is said to be 35 years old, 20 years younger than my husband. She's wearing a revealing outfit and heavy makeup. It's a big difference from me, who's starting to show wrinkles. I honestly don't see you as a woman anymore, and I want to take responsibility for her child, so please, let's get a divorce. I had reached the limit of my patience with these selfish people. I have been patient for the sake of our children and our life, but now I have no love left for my husband. I have been struggling all this time while he had been playing around. I decided to take revenge on my husband, to make him realize the hardships I went through. To his unusual plea, I nodded, agreeing to his proposal. Okay, fine. Are you okay with that? My husband was surprised and raised his voice in disbelief, perhaps because I had agreed too easily. Of course. Here's the divorce papers. I'll take everyone with me except for Alex. When I said that, my husband frowned suspiciously. What? Take Alex with you too. I couldn't believe what my husband was saying. That's impossible because Alex is your son, right? I'm not related by blood with him, and he and I don't get along. I don't care about that. You said you would love him as your real son. Yes, that's right. I've always treated him as if he was my real family. I never distinguished between my biological and non-biological children. I always cared for them in my own way. Then take responsibility until the end. John's words prompted his mistress to speak. Yes, yes. I can't be a mother to a high school student. You should take care of him, since you're much older. Right now, Alex is home and probably can hear this conversation. He never warmed up to me due to his rebellious phase, but this is really too much for him, and I felt bad for him. He is your son you had with your ex-wife. Take responsibility and look after him. What? You're heartless. Who's heartless here? You've never taken part in raising our kids, so who are you to say that? If you're not going to take care of him, I won't divorce you. John scratches his head in annoyance. He then lets out a heavy sigh. All right. I'll take care of Alex. What? I can't be a mother to your son. Sorry, but please, bear with him for a few more years. What? Well, it can't be helped then. I'll forgive you if you buy me a new bag from my favorite brand. John laughs foolishly and agrees to Amy. With the two of them looking as if they are about to start being lovey-dovey right there, I pull out the divorce papers. Can you sign these quickly? I'll go file them tomorrow. All right. You're such an impatient woman. While complaining, John signs the paper. I receive the signed divorce papers and securely put them into my bag. By the way, will you be okay after the divorce? You don't have a job or a place to live. I feel sorry for the kids. John smirks as he says that. He probably thinks I'm just a housewife with no savings. Thanks for worrying, but I have a job, so I'll be fine. Huh? You started working? But it's part-time work, isn't it? You won't be able to make ends meet with such a small salary. It's not part-time. I started my old job in web design. As long as I have a computer, I can work from home. Last month I made over $2,500, so I won't have any problems living."
Huh.
John seems frustrated. I had used my savings from when I worked years ago to buy a computer and started working as a web designer from home. Having had the experience, I was able to get to work immediately and was saving for when I would eventually get a divorce. The reason I could hand over the divorce papers so easily was because I had prepared everything for this moment. Not knowing this, John, who thought he had the upper hand, I laughed at him. "Anyway, are you guys going to be okay?"
What do you mean?
"Child support. I'll be receiving child support until Cherry and Albert become adults." John frowns. It's only natural that he would have to pay for his own children. Just because we're divorced, it doesn't mean he can abandon his parental responsibilities. Let's discuss the amount and make a contract through a lawyer later. It's for 2 kids, so I think it will be around $300 per month.
$300 per month? It's too much.
What are you talking about? Right now our child is a middle schooler. It costs money for club activities, personal tutors, and so on. Child support isn't just food and utilities. If anything, it's not enough.
Does it really cost that much?
John had never been involved with the household finances, so he didn't know. Our children, Cherry and Albert, who are part of the athletics club, need quite a bit of money for shoes, uniforms, and practice gears. It also costs some money when they have games away from their school. Even with a monthly allowance of $200 per person, it wouldn't be enough. Oh yeah, your girlfriend already knows too, right? About what? I looked at his mistress and smiled. The compensation, right? You've been having an affair for years, so you'll have to pay for the damages. I'm not really sure until I consult with the lawyer, but it seems to be around $25,000, so be prepared." "What? I didn't hear anything about that. I don't know anything about it." "You think that because you're over 30 and you don't know, so you're excused from it? Besides, we have all the evidence, so playing dumb won't help. When my husband stopped coming home, I hired a detective agency to investigate about his affair. Since then, I've known that he was dating his mistress, and even have photos of them together. There's no escaping now that all the evidence is gathered. Especially now that she's pregnant, there's no doubt he cheated, so there's no escaping." But she screamed with anger, unwilling to acknowledge the truth. "I don't have that kind of money. I don't even have savings. I'm about to have a child." "I don't care. If you can't afford it, why don't you ask your husband standing next to you to pay?" Amy grabbed John's shoulder and shook him. "You're going to pay, right?"
I can only afford child support. You'll have to pay on your own."
"Why? You're the one earning money. You should pay."
"I spent everything on gifts for you. How much do you think I spent on those gifts I gave you?"
"What? You're seriously useless. I didn't hear anything about you not having money." The atmosphere between the two, who were so pleasant when they arrived, had turned sour, and I had to laugh. After all, she was probably after his money. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dated a man in his 50s. It's my husband's fault for laying a hand on another woman while still being married to me. However, if Amy continued the relationship knowing it was an affair, she's just as guilty. I wouldn't be satisfied unless she also paid me the amount I request for. First of all, I thought of marrying you because you promised not to make me suffer and to buy me whatever I wanted. I don't know anything about compensation. I won't pay." "You can refuse if you want, but I'm going to consult a lawyer. Shall we meet in court?" When I intentionally mentioned the word court, she stood up in a panic. "No way! I don't want to marry such an old man and go into debt." especially with a son who's going to college. I really don't want that. I'm leaving." "Wait!" Amy grabbed her bag and dashed out the door. John tried to stop her, but she shoved him aside, and he ended up on the floor. It was a ridiculous sight. Oh, she ran away. "It's not, oh, because of you this happened." John, now furious, got up. "What? If you're going to hit me, I'll call the police." "You, acting so high and mighty, you'll be punished for ruining this marriage." At John's words, I burst out laughing. "Punished? Then you'll be punished for neglecting me and our family, won't you?" John glared at me in silence, looking frustrated. He probably still doesn't fully understand the situation. So I decided to drop one more bomb on him. "By the way, the tuition for our son Alex's entrance fee is due this week. Be careful." "What?" "So I told you, Alex is going to be a university student soon, right? You'll need to pay the entrance fee to enroll him, so that's why I'm telling you to pay it. You're going to take care of Alex, right?" Upon saying this, my husband was dumbfounded. He has been neglecting Alex for many years, so he probably has no idea about the school he will be attending or how much it will cost. "How much is it anyway?" "It's a private university, so it's about $12,000.
$12,000? There's no way I can afford that."
"Well, that's the amount you pay in the first year. After that, I think it will cost around $10,000 each year for tuition fees and facility fees, so do your best."
"You're joking, right?"
I was surprised to learn that private university tuition fees are so high because I attended a public university and didn't know much about how it cost. Jean also attended a public university, so he probably never thought it would come to this.
"Why did you let him enroll in such an expensive university?"
"It's not my fault. I told Alex to study, but he wouldn't listen. You didn't do anything when I consulted with you."
"Even so, to let him enroll in such a university without my consent? I won't accept this."
"Then why don't you talk to him about it? Alex is the one who decided to go to that university." Upon saying this, John fell silent. Perhaps he doesn't know how to deal with Alex because he has neglected his parenting duties until now. I have no intention of worrying about the two of them. Well, we'll gather our things and leave. As I said this and stood up, John suddenly tried to hold me back.
"Wait, let's try again."
"What are you talking about?"
"No, I've reconsidered. I think it's better not to divorce for the sake of our children."
John sounded serious. However, his words about our children were all excuses. "You just don't want to pay child support and division of property, do you?" "I don't want to. I can't live with you anymore."
"Why not? I've broken up with Amy, and I won't cheat anymore, so let's try again."
"Absolutely not. I can't imagine living with someone who doesn't take care of his children, plays around, and impregnates someone 20 years younger than him." "It seems you misunderstood something. I didn't agree to divorce because you said you wanted to."
"Then why?"
"I've wanted to divorce you for a long time, but I couldn't because I didn't have the money. I've been working hard and saving up, so it's just the right time. Even if you hadn't said you wanted a divorce, I would have proposed it to you."
"You're kidding."
John was speechless. Perhaps he thought he was loved by me. I'm not a saint who can love a man who has done such terrible things to me.
"But the children would prefer to have both parents together. Divorce is bad for their education and for their mental health."
John said this. That's when Cherry and Albert, who had been listening to our conversation, burst out of their rooms. "I don't want to live with a father like him." "I can't either."
"Cherry, Albert, how can you say such things to your father?"
The children came to my side and glared at John. Don't act like a father when you've never done anything before. It's really disgusting for a person like you to cheat on Mom all the time. I don't want to think of a person like you as my parent. It's much better to live just with Mom after divorce.
You guys?
John seemed more shocked than angry. He stood there with his mouth open in surprise. Don't underestimate them just because they're kids. They can see what adults do, and they definitely can judge right from wrong. You still think you're liked by your kids because you're their father?
But what I did was wrong, so forgive me. I'll do anything. I'll buy you anything you want, and I'll take you wherever you want to go.
We don't need such things. I don't even want to see you. Upon hearing the children's words, John finally fell to his knees. Did he really think he could bribe and win over his children with things? If so, he is severely underestimating them. The kids knew I was struggling since they were in elementary school. They are considerate enough to worry about me. They will not forgive John easily. We gathered our things and left the house without saying a word to John, who was sitting down. In the end, I divorced John. I'm sure John is struggling with the division of property and child support. Apparently, he's being asked to pay child support to his mistress, who has also given birth to their child. If he continues to pay child support until the children are adults, he will have to keep paying even after retirement. He messed around with a younger girl because he preferred younger women, but he really did a stupid thing. And because he never did any housework before, his house is in a terrible state. Apparently, he can't even do laundry properly and is using the same wrinkled shirt over and over again, which is making him unpopular at work and in his neighborhood. His kids and mistress have left him. He has no one to rely on. He has no money to play around with, and I hear he's like a zombie. But that's none of my business anymore. And so we started a new life. Cherry, Albert, you'll be late for middle school. Okay. Both of them put their bags on their shoulders and ran to the entrance. Alex, you need to leave soon, too, or you'll be late.
Yeah, you're so noisy.
Alex, the eldest son, also dressed in a suit and headed for the entrance. The day I divorced my husband, when I was about to leave the house with my belongings, Alex was standing in the hallway. He must have been listening to our conversation all along. Unable to ignore him, I spoke to him. What do you want to do? After much deliberation, my eldest son decided to come with me. To be honest, if I paid for my eldest son's tuition, life would be tough from then on. But my eldest son is a victim too. He must have been devastated when his biological parents said they didn't want to take him in. His rough times during his student years were largely influenced by the environment back at home. A father who never comes home and is always out playing. And me, who couldn't pay attention to him because I was too busy taking care of the younger kids. When he needed a parent, Alex was always left alone. I couldn't just abandon him like that. When we arrived at the new apartment, Alex said that he was going to quit college.
You don't have to pay for my tuition. I'll earn it.
I was glad to hear my son's sentiment, but I honestly didn't think he could get a decent job as a high school graduate. So I made a proposal to my son. Why don't you study programming?
Programming?
Yes, in this internet society, if you can do codes and programming, you won't have trouble finding a job. Study seriously for a year and try to get a job. Until then, I will provide all your expenses. With that, my son listened to me surprisingly and studied hard. In just 6 months, he was good enough to get a job, and this year he was hired as a full-time employee. The children, in suit in uniforms are making a fuss at the entrance. "Don't talk to Mom like that. It's rude."
"Anyone who complains won't get a ride in the car."
"Liar! Give us a ride."
"Bro, don't get into an accident."
Cherry and Albert, who were previously afraid of Alex, and didn't even talk to him, are now completely attached to him. And the three children who had finished putting on their shoes turned around and looked at me.
"We're off."
All the children left the house after saying that. I never thought this day would come. I finally feel like I've become a family with Alex. I vowed once again in my heart to do my best for the happiness of my children from now on. My husband, James, was urgently transported from his business trip. Receiving the contact, I hurried to the hospital. However,
"Don't you think I'm definitely better than a failure of a wife like you, Grace, who is unattractive and looking older than her age?"
This was when I witnessed an unbelievable sight. My sister-in-law and my husband. They were naked, embracing each other. Along with the surprise, a sense of disgust welled up. Because it's just impossible, right? They are real siblings, aren't they? I could hear my sister-in-law's seductive voice, and I inadvertently covered my ears. When I got the call, I have bursted out with a lot of tears from anxiety. About my beloved husband being gone. What was that all for? I want those tears back. No, that's not it, Grace. No matter what he says, I can't forgive him anymore. They betrayed me. I'll never forgive them. In anger, I turned on my smartphone and called someone. To someone whom they will definitely don't want to meet. My name is Grace. I'm a working housewife, turning 35 this year. I've been married to my husband, James, who is 2 years older, for 5 years. James was a senior at the high school where I used to attend, but at that time, we haven't known each other. I found out that we were from the same high school during our first date. Just before I met James, I had broken up with my longtime boyfriend. Believing I needed a new love to forget the old one, I half-heartedly participated in a blind date. That's where I met James. It seemed that James had also just broken up with his girlfriend, and we developed feelings for each other as we comforted each other. It seemed the same for James, so we have arranged to date another day. During that date, we discovered we were from the same high school. As a result of the growing affinity, we began a serious relationship with the future in mind. After a few years of dating, we got married. I think James is a very good man to spend life with as a marriage partner. He is always willing to help housework and never forgets to enjoy events such as birthdays and Christmas. And because James works for a reputable company, there's virtually no overtime or weekend work. Since we don't have children, he loves me with all his heart. I'm truly glad I was able to marry this man. However, while leading a fulfilling married life, there was one thing that worried me a bit. It was about the relationship with my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is a married woman who is 3 years older than James, living about 10 minutes away from her home. She seems to have adored James since they were young, and when they were in elementary school, they were together all the time. Her affection for James didn't change in junior high and high school, and even as adults, it continues. To her, James must be her adorable little brother forever. And to her, I am the evil woman who stole her cute brother. When I went to meet his family to announce our marriage, she said that directly to me. I want to have a normal relationship with her, not necessarily a friendly one, but that seems to be an unreachable dream. So, at least from my side, I try to avoid contact with her. However, my sister-in-law doesn't care about that, and calls whenever there's a chance, nagging and making sarcastic remarks.
"Hello, Grace. Haven't you quit your job yet? Stop thinking about yourself."
and become a full-time housewife to support James properly. I've told you so many times. James can take care of himself, even without me supporting him. He's fine. Don't talk back to me. Besides, I know better than anyone that James can do everything by himself. Just because you're his wife, don't think you can act superior. You're unpleasant. With everything going like this, I can only smile bitterly and accompany her in conversation until she is satisfied. I have never reported such behavior of my sister-in-law to James, but I have consulted my mother-in-law, who lives a short distance away. Unlike my antagonistic sister-in-law, my mother-in-law treats me very well. We even arrange to have tea together sometimes. After the consultation, my mother-in-law, astounded at my sister-in-law's selfish attitude, firmly cautioned her. Thanks to that, the sarcastic remarks from my sister-in-law have gotten much better than just after the marriage. In any case, I wish you would accept James and me soon. Then, one day happened. That day, I had to work overtime for the first time in a while. I ended up coming home an hour later than usual, but since James was cooking dinner, I decided to go straight home without stopping by the supermarket. I was tired today and thought of going to bed early. As I passed through the ticket gates at the station nearest to my home, I locked eyes with a man. It was my sister-in-law's husband. I instinctively nodded in greeting, and he responded with a hello and a smile. I only see him for a few hours during the Christmas and New Year holidays, but since we were heading in the same direction, we ended up walking home together. Fortunately, he is sociable, so there were no awkward silences along the way. We chatted about harmless topics as we walked down the dark street. After about 15 minutes of walking together from the station, he raised his hand slightly, said, "Well, I'm going this way. Please be careful on your way home," and left. Even though he told me to be careful, my house was right in front of me. It seemed like he had walked with me because he was worried about me walking alone in the dark. I hadn't interacted with him much before, but I realized he was a good person. I watched him walk away before I entered my house. The next day, I had the day off, so I waved goodbye to James as he left for work, and enjoyed a cup of coffee in the living room. Then, the doorbell rang, indicating a visitor. I put my half-finished cup of coffee on the dining table and peered into the intercom monitor. It was my sister-in-law. I wondered if she had come to make sarcastic remarks. Despite feeling fed up, I headed to the front door. I could have ignored her, but if she found out I was pretending to be out, it would become even more troublesome. If I just let her talk, she would eventually leave. The moment I opened the front door, my sister-in-law grabbed my shoulder and raised her voice. "You're having an affair with my husband, aren't you? You're really the worst kind of woman. You're nothing like the quiet person you appear to be." I was taken aback, unable to comprehend what she was accusing me of for a moment. As I stood dumbfounded, my sister-in-law became more heated. "Why are you looking so surprised? It's disgusting. I know you met with my husband last night." It was then that I finally understood what she was talking about. She was talking about how I happened to meet her husband last night and walked home with him. Had she been watching us from somewhere? Or maybe her husband had told her himself. Either way, I haven't cheated on anyone. It was a misunderstanding on her part. When I told her this, she snorted in contempt and spat out. "What a shameless woman you are. I'll get you for this," before storming off. Although she didn't seem convinced, I was relieved that she left. I hope this doesn't escalate any further. A few weeks later, James had to go on a business trip. James had been working a lot of overtime and going into the office on his days off recently. It was unusual for him to work overtime or go in on weekends, so when I asked about it, he said he had been preparing for his business trip.
Well, I'm off. Please take care of the house while I'm away. Don't get lonely and cry because I'm not around."
James said in a teasing tone and left. Well, I need to do my best at my own job too. I was just entering a busy period, so I had 2 busy days. And then, on the morning of the 3rd day, after James went on his business trip, while I was preparing for work, my phone rang. The screen of my smartphone displayed an unfamiliar phone number. Who could it be this early in the morning? Hello. May I ask who's calling? In response to my question, the person on the other end of the line said they were from the municipal hospital. That didn't mean anything to me. It seemed to be a hospital located about an hour away from my house. And I haven't been to a hospital recently. Anyway, I had no idea why they were calling. Are you sure you have the right number? I'm sorry, but I haven't been to your hospital before. Then the other person said, "Is this Grace?" and called my name.
Actually, James has been involved in a traffic accident and was just rushed to a hospital. He is currently sleeping due to the shock of the accident. So we're contacting you on his behalf.
Traffic accident, emergency transportation. Hearing these words, I felt a chill run down my spine. Is James all right?
He seems to be out of danger for now, but we think it's best if he stays in the hospital for 2 to 3 days just to be safe. We'll explain more in detail. Could you come to the hospital?
I replied. I'll be there right away, confirmed the detailed address of the hospital, and hung up the phone. I then explained the situation to my workplace. My boss was very concerned and kindly said that I could take paid leave for a while. I changed from my work uniform into my casual clothes and decided to head to the hospital. On my way to the nearest station, I noticed something. The address of the hospital and the business trip destination that James had told me about were in completely different prefectures. Was it my misunderstanding, or had James misspoken? I was bothered by it, but I couldn't figure it out with my confused mind. I aimed for the hospital no matter what. About an hour later, I arrived at the hospital where James had been taken. At the reception desk, I checked the room number where James was and hurried to it. I found the room with James's name on it and was about to open the door quickly. But I thought he might still be sleeping, so I opened it quietly. This room was a double room with beds on both sides. The one on the right seemed to be vacant as there was no patient at the moment. And around the bed on the left, a curtain was drawn, making it impossible to see what was going on. James should be behind that curtain. When I entered the room, I heard a strange noise. It was unclear, but it sounded like a voice. I could also hear a creaking noise. It seemed to be coming from the bed where James was supposed to be sleeping. For some reason, I had a bad feeling and slowly approached the bed. I carefully looked at the bed through a gap in the curtain. There, on the bed, were the figures of a completely naked James, and a likewise completely naked woman. And what's more, on closer inspection, that woman turned out to be my sister-in-law, which was even more of a shock.
"Isn't someone like me better than a failure of a wife like you, Grace?"
The moment her sweet voice reached my ears, feelings of surprise and disgust welled up within me. I pressed a hand to my mouth, suppressing the urge to vomit, and rolled out of the room and out to the hallway. I found a bench nearby and sat down, taking deep breaths to calm myself. Then I tried to understand the situation on my own. James had left home 3 days ago, saying he was going on a business trip. But that was a lie. He must have been meeting my sister-in-law under the pretense of a business trip. Then, for some reason, James had a traffic accident this morning. When the hospital called me, they didn't mention my sister-in-law. So I can assume that when the accident occurred, James and my sister-in-law were not together. After that, while I was on my way to the hospital. James must have woken up and contacted my sister-in-law. Then he called her to his hospital room, and they engaged in an adulterous act. While all of this is pure speculation, it doesn't seem far from the truth given the circumstances. In any case, the fact that James lied about going on a trip, and the two of them are having a guilty relationship, is certain. I don't know when their relationship started, but it's a tremendous act of betrayal. Maybe they were laughing at me for not noticing their affair. With that thought, I was filled with anger. In my impulse, I returned to the hospital room. I quietly entered the room, making sure not to alert James or my sister-in-law, and took all the clothes and underwear scattered on the floor. Now they have nowhere to run. Then I slipped out of the room again and called my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law responded quickly. Mother-in-law, could you come to the address I'm going to tell you? James has been brought in urgently. I didn't tell her that James and my sister-in-law had been committing infidelity. I thought it would be quicker for her to see it with her own eyes than for me to explain. And so, I waited for about 2 hours. My mother-in-law arrived at the hospital, her face pale with panic. Unaware of her own children's infidelity, my mother-in-law worried about James's condition. I felt sorry for her even though it was not my fault. I tried to calm my mother-in-law down as we made our way toward the room where James and my sister-in-law were. I saw a crowd of hospital patients, visitors, and nurses. I wondered what had happened. Holding my mother-in-law's hand, I squeezed through the crowd down the hallway. Then, a familiar voice rang out. "Where did our clothes go? Give them back." When I looked at the voice, there was my sister-in-law, covering her naked body with bed sheets. James was doing the same. "I have no idea. Why are you two naked? What on earth were you doing here?" The nurse raised her voice against the two.
What's going on? James was taken away on an emergency, and then
My mother-in-law, standing a little behind me, murmured in confusion. When they finally noticed our presence, the two of them opened their eyes wide. "I have James and your clothes. If you want them back, explain everything. Are you two having an affair?" I showed them the clothes and underwear. This seemed to infuriate my sister-in-law, who then approached me, not caring that her sheets were being undone.
"How dare you talk back? Yes, that's right. James and I are in love. You're the one who came between us."
As my sister-in-law exclaimed, James nodded deeply behind her.
"Moreover, weren't you also having an affair, Grace? I heard from my sister that you were meeting your husband secretly."
James puffed his chest out as if he had one. Looking at him, I felt my love for him completely vanish. He chose to believe my sister-in-law over me. I had no regrets left for him. Just as I was about to counter, my mother-in-law spoke first.
"You two, I never thought my children could be so stupid. I'm going to break off our parent-child relationship. Don't ever step foot in my house again. You two can go wherever you want."
An unexpectedly stern and low voice coming from my usually gentle mother-in-law accuses the two of them. Overwhelmed by her fury, or perhaps finally realizing the gravity of their actions, both James and sister-in-law are down, unable to say anything. I tossed their clothes and underwear at them. The sight of them picking up the scattered clothing from the floor was truly ridiculous. "James, I never cheated. It's just a misunderstanding on my sister-in-law's part. I can't continue as husband and wife any longer. Be prepared for when you're discharged. I'll be claiming a hefty division of property. And of course, I'll tell your husband." With that declaration, James and my sister-in-law, still wrapped in their sheets, slumped in defeat. After a while, I formally divorced James. After the incident, my mother-in-law and I left them behind and returned home first. Apparently, James, who was supposed to be hospitalized, was severely scolded for, significantly disrupting the hospital's order, and my sister-in-law was banned from entering. Then, as I declared, I claimed a division of property from James. Furthermore, once my sister-in-law's husband found out the situation, he also sought a divorce and claimed the consolation fee, left the two of them struggling with enormous payments, working day and night, toiling away. For a while, James and my sister-in-law, who had both become single, lived together. But due to their strained living conditions, they were constantly arguing and soon separated. Perhaps they were intoxicated by the affair situation, and when that was gone, they might have felt there was no point in being together. After that, James sought to reconcile several times. Naturally, I had no intention of reconciling. The third time he asked for a reconciliation, I warned him that I would call the police. If he continued to pester me, and since then, he hasn't shown up. So I don't know what's happening with James now, but the division of property continues to be paid. So I guess he's managing somehow somewhere. And my sister-in-law, who separated from James, seemed to have been barely making ends meet with day labor, but it seemed like she had reached her limit and finally started working at night. Speaking of which, a few years ago, my sister-in-law said things like, "Women who work at night are pitiful." Now that she has become that pitiful woman, I wonder how she feels. I hope she is reflecting on her actions. As for me, I moved to start a new life. I now live in an apartment near my workplace. I still occasionally contact my mother-in-law. Initially, my mother-in-law was very depressed, but lately, she seems to be slowly recovering, which is a relief. I plan to have a tea party at home this Sunday. I felt as if I couldn't recover for a while after being betrayed by someone I trusted. However, I can't afford to dwell on it forever, considering this is the start of my second life. I'll live positively to seize happiness. That's what I vowed in my heart. My name is Emily. I've been married to my husband, Jacob, for 11 years now. I've been a full-time housewife since we got married, raising our 2 boys. My husband works in construction, and many of his days consist of leaving early in the morning and coming home late. There were also times when he had to go to work, even on his days off, because he said he wouldn't make the deadline. As a result, I was mostly single-handedly responsible for raising our children. Our sons are 9 and 8 years old, both at an age where they're mischievous kids. Since they're boys, they're quite strong, and it was difficult to break up their fights. One day when I finally got the boys to sleep and was resting, my husband came home. "You're late again today. You must be tired." As usual, I spoke to my husband and started preparing his dinner. Normally, he would come to the dining table immediately, but today he didn't. When I looked at him wondering why, he was looking guiltily at me. Seeing him like this, I had a bad feeling, but kept calm and asked him, "What's up all of a sudden?" Without lifting his head, he said to me, "I really feel really guilty, Emily, and I'm sorry. The woman I cheated on you with is pregnant. So can we get a divorce?" Well, it seems that my hunch was right. I had been suspicious of my husband's recent behavior and had suspected he might be cheating on me. However, I didn't expect that the woman he cheated with got pregnant. While being surprised by this, I said, "You can't just drop this on me. What about our sons? They're still in elementary school. How are we supposed to explain this to them?" I waited for his response, but he kept silent, looking down. Even though I tried to get him to talk, he remained silent and didn't move. Thinking this wasn't going anywhere, I suggested we talk the next day, as it was late, and went straight to bed. Then the next day came. It was a holiday, and the children didn't have school. Once I confirmed that the kids went out to play, I spoke to my husband. About what you said yesterday. By saying she's pregnant, you mean you've been cheating, right?
I'm really sorry. I know I did something wrong, but since she's pregnant, I guess I have to marry her. You're strong, Emily, and I'm sure you'll be fine even without me. You're a full-time housewife now, but I know you can raise our sons well even while working.
What are you talking about? Do you think I would agree to divorce you right now?
I won't allow you to divorce me and be happy on your own by remarrying your mistress.
It seemed like my husband assumed I would instantly agree to the divorce, and he was surprised when I refused. I was angry that his words of apology were not reflected in his actions. What really infuriated me, though, was the situation with our sons. The truth is, my eldest son is not my biological child, but my sister-in-law's son. She divorced 5 years ago and was raising her son all on her own. But she shoved him onto us, saying that having a child would be a disadvantage when she remarries. At first I objected, but instead of getting mad at my sister-in-law, my husband and his mother thought it was a great idea, and so we ended up taking him in and raising him. My eldest son, Cameron, was 4 at the time, old enough to remember his mother. Despite that, he was terribly upset when he found out that I was suddenly his mother. "You're not my mom. Where's my real mom? Give her back." Cameron would say horrible things to me every day. When I got angry, even though he was only 4 years old, he would leave to my in-laws' house. Since we lived separately but still lived in the same property, it only took a few seconds to get there. But he shouldn't have gone without telling me, and every time Cameron went to my in-laws, I would get scolded by my mother-in-law. And looking at all this, my eldest son seemed to be enjoying himself. Even in such circumstances, I treated both my sons equally, thinking that as time went by, he would come to like me. But that didn't happen, and it seemed that he still disliked me. Gradually, he began to take his anger out not just on me, but also on his younger brother, James. "Your mom's a bad guy. She sent my mom away somewhere. Being her kid, you don't deserve to play with toys." He would say things like that and take toys away from his younger brother. Even though I bought the same toys for both of them, he always wanted his younger brother's toys and would snatch them. As for my husband, he just watched TV and never scolded Cameron. Rather, he would selfishly get angry at the kids, saying, "You're too noisy. We can't hear the TV." Of course, I understood that he was busy with work, but I always thought that he could at least help out a little. There's no way I could take care of 2 boys in this situation. That's why I insisted on taking only my younger son with me as a condition when divorcing Jacob. If we're getting divorced, I'm taking James with me. Cameron is originally your sister's child, isn't he? If I divorce you, he won't be my responsibility anymore.
Isn't that a bit much? You've lived together for 5 years, and Cameron is very attached to you, Emily. Are you going to separate him from James, his little brother, whom he's very close to?
Cameron is attached to me? The boys get along well? Are you seriously saying that? I was astounded at Jacob, who seemed to have no understanding of his own family situation. How can he say that Cameron is attached to me? As for the boys, it's not always Cameron's fault, but they argue every single day. Cameron is already strong now, and I don't think I'll be able to handle once he grows up. Anyway, if we divorce, I'm taking James with me. You can take care of Cameron. Then we can cancel out the child support.
Okay.
I've reached an agreement with Jacob. All that's left is to demand the division of property from Jacob. The next day, after sending the boys off to school, I decided to consult a lawyer and a private investigator immediately. In the discussion with the lawyer, since Jacob admits to his affair, I was told that I can definitely claim the division of property. The amount of the division of property will be determined by the evidence from the detective agency. I returned home and waited for a call from the detective agency, while steadily preparing for the divorce. 2 weeks later, the detective agency contacted me that the evidence was ready, and I arranged to meet with the person in charge of my lawyer. They only had to investigate twice, but the evidence was quickly gathered. Furthermore, it seemed that there were times when Jacob Cameron and the mistress were all out together. Although I had agreed with Jacob that he would take Cameron, I was surprised that he was introducing his mistress to Cameron without my knowledge. As for Jacob's behavior, I had been thinking that he was coming home late because he was constantly working overtime, but it appears I was mistaken. Although I have some suspicions, I never thought he would continue his affair even after confessing it to me. Thanks to that, I was able to gather evidence, and now I can get a divorce in a way that's more advantageous to me. While looking at the evidence with my lawyer, we decided to send a certified letter to his mistress. That night, I showed Jacob the evidence from the detective agency and the certified letter prepared by the lawyer. I have solid evidence of your affair. I've also sent a certified letter to your mistress. If you agree to pay the division of property, I can grant you a divorce right now.
Really? It's been a while since we talked about divorce. I was worried about whether we could really get a divorce, but I'm relieved. The division of property? What do you mean? Why did you collect evidence when I honestly told you about the affair?
Because you're the one who had an affair. You're responsible for the divorce, right? I think it's only natural to pay the division of property. It seems that Jacob thought that if he honestly reported his affair, everything would be fine. How pathetic of him. No matter how much I explain, he doesn't seem to understand at all. I thought it would be pointless to explain at this pace, so I decided to have a lawyer explain it again to him later on. A few days later, as I was doing household chores as usual, I received a call from an unknown number. I thought it might be Jacob's mistress, but it was actually my sister-in-law, Sarah. "Emily, it's been a while. I heard from Cameron and wanted to call you. You're getting divorced, aren't you? Surely Cameron will be taken by you, right?" "Sarah, long time no see." "What? Have you heard from Cameron even though I haven't told the children yet?" "I'm sorry, but Jacob and I have decided that Cameron will be taken by Jacob." "Oh, so that's why Cameron was crying. Emily, I hate to say this, but isn't that cruel? I heard from Jacob, and Cameron and James are good friends, right? And yet you're separating the two of them." I was frustrated by Sarah's selfish remarks, but I was even angrier at Jacob for lying to her. "Sarah, you are mistaken. Cameron and James are always fighting, and they're not getting along well. Anyway, if the boys already know about the divorce, I must explain it properly. I'm hanging up now." "Wait a minute." I hung up the phone without listening to what Sarah was trying to say. And then I waited for my sons to come home. A few hours later, my sons came home, and I was about to explain, but Cameron spoke first. "Please, take me with you too." "You knew, didn't you? But you went out with Jacob and his mistress, right? You seemed to be enjoying yourself. Despite that, what's wrong with being with Jacob?" "I hate him. His tone of voice is scary, and my belongings and clothes all have a strange smell. I feel sick when I'm with him." Could the strange smell be the perfume? I had noticed a sweet smell on Jacob's clothes before, but I thought it was from a coworker. Now I realize it must have been his mistress's perfume. But Cameron, you're always mean to James, and you two often fight. I can't break up the fights you have with each other forever. Besides, I thought you hated me. You want to go with someone you hate instead of Jacob?
Emily, I want to go with you, Mom. I regret what I've done before, and I promise I'll be good. Please.
Cameron pleaded like that, crying. I was happy that he called me Mom for the first time.
Mom, please, take my brother too. We'll be good, please.
After hearing this from my sons, I had no choice but to agree. I was anxious, but we had lived together for 5 years, and I had always wanted Cameron to call me Mom, so I was happy. I immediately told the lawyer that I wanted to take both of my sons. The lawyer's instructions were to discuss child support with Jacob. Then I spoke to Jacob when he returned from work. After all, I'm taking Cameron with me.
What are you talking about now? I've introduced him to Erica. It is a problem if you say that.
I've informed the lawyer about this. It may be too late, but Cameron wants to come with me. Cameron is 10 years old, so his wishes should be respected. Anyway, we're going to discuss the compensation as well the day after tomorrow, so please ask any questions then. Make sure you tell your mistress to come properly. Jacob was angry about Cameron, but didn't say anything in particular, and our conversation ended. The day after tomorrow. The day of the discussion came. Although we were supposed to go to the same destination, Jacob left first. He must be going to pick up his mistress. After confirming that Cameron and James had gone out to play, I headed to the office alone. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, as expected, Jacob and his mistress were already there, sitting on the sofa like a couple. Seeing the affair partner for the first time other than in pictures, I was surprised that her belly was more bigger than I had imagined. Although it's only been about a month since I heard she was pregnant, it looked like she would give birth in another 2 to 3 months. I thought Jacob must have been hiding it from me, but I decided to proceed with the conversation without worrying about it. As you can see from the content certificate, I will claim damages for this affair from both of you. Also, I will take custody of my sons, so I will also claim child support from Jacob. What's a content certificate? What does compensation mean? Am I getting it? I came here because I heard you two were getting divorced today, right? Jacob's mistress, Erica, seemed to have not read the content certificate. It did feel a bit strange, because she had received the content certificate, but there was no contact from her, and her attitude today did not seem like someone who thought she was going to be asked for compensation. You have to pay the damages for having an affair with Jacob. Neither Jacob nor Erica seemed to understand, but after an explanation from the lawyer, they finally seemed to grasp the situation. Both Jacob and Erica became frantic. It's impossible. I can't pay. I'm pregnant, you know. I resigned from my company because I said I'm getting married and I don't have any savings.
That's right. Compensation and child support, there's no way we can pay that. That's it. We can offset the child support with the child that Erica is pregnant with and the 2 kids, Cameron and James.
Did Jacob not realize that he was making an outrageous statement? I didn't think that he was completely unaware about what would happen in divorce and compensation to this extent. Why would I offset child support for a child that's not mine? It's completely unrelated. But if I have to pay both compensation and child support, I won't be able to live. My baby will be born soon, and I won't have any money to prepare.
That has nothing to do with me. Anyway, please take responsibility for having an affair. The lawyer took out documents related to compensation and child support and showed them to Jacob and Erica. I had asked the lawyer to make a notarized document to ensure that it would be paid properly. Upon seeing the amount recorded on the document, the two were even more astonished and turned pale. It's no wonder they were shocked, since they were requested for an amount higher than what they had imagined.
I can't pay this amount. If I pay this much every month, I won't be able to live.
I knew you would say that, but if you don't agree to the compensation and child support, I won't divorce you. Erica seemed more anxious than he was. The one who would be most troubled if we don't divorce must be Erica. As if to add salt to the wound, there was someone else being called here. That person should be coming soon, I believe. Excuse me.
Mom, why are you here?
I had, of course, explained to my mother-in-law Mary what Jacob had done. Initially I thought she was my enemy because she told me to raise Cameron. Mary, who is not physically strong, judged that she couldn't raise a boy and asked me to take care of Cameron. She cared about Cameron and did come to help me out. I realized later that she got angry at me because she cared about him. Mary has always been strict and hates dishonesty. Jacob had always been intimidated by her and never had a rebellious phase. So I asked for her cooperation this time and had her come today. Jacob, what have you done? It's natural to pay compensation and child support. Don't fuss. Are you aware of what you've done?
Mom, Erica's here. Stop it.
What? Erica? Stop fooling around. Don't ever come across my house again.
Both Jacob and Erica were completely intimidated by Mary's power. Erica began to cry and apologize.
I'm sorry. I'll sign to pay the compensation, so please just let me go home.
I promised to pay too.
Thanks to Mary's power, I was able to get them to promise to pay the compensation. Of course, I also got Jacob to agree to pay child support. This settled things, and on the way home Mary and I went to pick up our sons and had our first meal out for Cameron. After that, there were payments from Jacob and Erica for compensation, but since Erica said she had no savings, her parents covered for it. I heard a rumor that the two married but continued to fight over money, and Jacob cheated again, leading to a quick divorce. In addition, Erica had to work from morning to night, leaving her baby with her parents, to pay back the money she borrowed from them. Jacob, having cheated twice, lost trust within his company and was demoted to a department where those about to be laid off were sent. His salary also decreased, and he's reportedly struggling financially. As for me, I ended up adopting Cameron as a special adopted child, and I feel like I've become his mother officially, and he became my official son. Cameron has kept his promise and has become a much better older brother than before. We still live in the house we used to live in, and I occasionally go out to eat with Mary. I want to continue living happily with my sons.